Hi everybody, and welcome to my studio today. On this video we are going to paint this really cute farmer's market sign, and I have done this with scrapbooking paper that already has a crackle finish to it, but in the video I show you how to get the crackle finish if you cannot find the scrapbooking paper. And this is a really cute, fun project. I think you're going to enjoy it. So let's turn around to my paint table and let's get started. Okay, before we start this project, I am going to show you how to do the crackling medium. In this instructional video, we do this on a piece of scrap paper which is already crackled. But if you can't find this or don't have access to it, I want to show you how to get the crackled background without the scrapbooking paper. So I've got another surface here that I have painted multi-purpose sealer on. And the first thing we want to do is lay down a color. Now the background in this one looks like it could be milk chocolate. I think I say milk chocolate in the other part of my video. Or you could use probably burnt umber or asphaltum. I think we might go with asphaltum. Soft black is the color that's around the edges of this piece. So I think I'll try some asphaltum on here. And I would recommend you applying the paint with a dampened 2-inch foam roller. So let me get this a little wet. Wring out the excess moisture. Squeeze out the excess moisture into a paper towel. We don't want this to be super wet because it'll thin our paint down too much. So grab some asphaltum, which isn't going to be much different than the color of this particular surface. And put a coat of paint on here, or some burnt umber. Even milk chocolate would be fine to use if you want to use milk chocolate. Or you could mix some browns. But I wouldn't use soft black, even though soft black is the color that we're using everywhere else for our colors. I would make the underneath color here just slightly different. So we're going to let that dry because one coat may be enough on here. I'm going to let it dry and look because the color is so close to the color of the background. I think I'm going to have to apply 2 coats. So we're going to let this dry. So wrap up your roller in a plastic bag and set it aside, and when it dries apply a second coat. Okay, my surface is dry. I've got a couple of coats on here. So I want to very quickly just lightly sand it. Now you can do this with a brown paper bag. Just very, very lightly. And then wipe off any sanding dust. And then we're going to apply a coat of crackling medium. Now, the crackling medium, if you apply it thick, it will make really big cracks. And if you apply it more thinly, it will make thinner cracks. So in this piece you can see there are some they're not super big cracks. So we're going to give a generous amount of crackling medium on here and get it on. The thinner it is, the thinner the cracks. Okay, so I'm going to apply it in an up and down motion here, and I'm really loading it on my brush, a generous amount. I want to make sure I get to the edges, pushing the brush kind of flat, pretty flat, and letting the crackling medium come out of my brush. And I'm loading each time I make one pass down with one side of the brush, and then another pass down, which I started running out of crackling medium there. So I'm going to pick up some more, go over here and paint this side in. And like I said, the thicker that you put it on, the thicker your cracks will be. And this is a fairly easy product to use. Okay, I think I've got it on there, a nice generous coat on there. So now I need to let this dry. I'm going to flip my papers over so that it doesn't stick to it as it dries. And we're going to let it get completely dry. And then I'm going to let it dry an hour and feel it and see how tacky it is. And I'll come back in an hour and let you know how it feels to see if I need to let it dry some more. Okay, my crackle medium is dry. It has been right at an hour here. And I just want to show you, it looks wet, but it is not. So you see where it's really got lots of spaces in between it here? That's where I'm going to have my bigger cracks. And where it's not as much on it, I'll have my smaller cracks there. So when your crackling medium dries, you can kind of see how your cracks are probably going to start appearing. Okay, so we are going to apply buttermilk on top of this. And the technique for applying paint onto a crackle medium is to lay your brush flat, have a generous amount of paint in your brush. Depending on how big your surface is, you might want to go with a fairly bigger brush. You can use a foam brush if you like, if you're doing a big surface, but so I've got my buttermilk here. I've got a slightly dampened brush. I'm going to load up my brush with this buttermilk, and I've really got a lot of paint in my brush here. Okay, we're going to start at one end, and I want my strokes to go up and down. So on your surface you want to go up and down and lay the just kind of lay the brush flat and let it skim across the surface. And try not to go back over what you've already painted, because you're just going to lift the crackle medium. So see, I didn't get a lot of paint there, but I'm not going back over it. See, but I do need to remove a little bit of paint right there. It's a little thick. It's already cracking. So, super awesome effect. I'm going to lay my brush flat, easy pressure. And I want to work as quickly as possible on here so that I can have pretty even strokes and not have, so when it dries it all looks like it's been painted on here at the same time. Really load my brush up here. Almost to the end here. Put out way more paint on my palette than I needed. Okay, so I've got my paint on. You can already see all these nice cracks that are coming in here, and I have variance in color in mine because some of my strokes had more paint on my brush than others, but I'm not going to worry about that because we are going to be antiquing the background when we're done. So if you cannot find scrapbooking paper to paint on that already looks crackled, and I don't think it's been that long since I had bought this scrapbooking paper, then you can make your own. And it's a lighter color, but then remember, I've aged the background on this one, so it'll be pretty close to the same once we're done. Again, I use buttermilk. You could probably use maybe sand. Sand might be a pretty good option as well if you don't have buttermilk. But it's just a super, super, super easy process to get your background. It's all in not going back over your crackle medium after you have laid the paint on. And you can't go back and do a second coat. So, you know, get your coat on there how you want. If you're applying a crackle medium, that means you want a more aged, worn look. So you have to be okay with missing some paint on a few places, okay? So that is how we do the crackle medium. Now I'm going to let this dry, and you can, once it's dry, you can just start painting, put your pattern on and start painting right on top of it. So I'm going to move on to the part of the video now that shows you how I apply the paper, and I will probably talk about the crackle medium again because I wasn't originally going to demonstrate the crackle medium, but I decided that some people might not have access to the scrapbooking paper. So I wanted to show you how to do it with the medium. Alright, let's move on to the scrapbook paper. Okay, we're going to get started on this project. Now, before I start, I want to show you some options that you have. Now, one of the options is that you can paint this whatever color that you want. Whatever you do, you want to apply a coat of multi-purpose sealer with a dampened artist sponge and let it dry, lightly sand it. And I have already done that step. So now we want to tell you about the options that you can do. One option is to paint it with milk chocolate, let it dry, apply a nice coat of weathered wood crackling medium on there. Now the more generous you are with the crackling medium, the bigger your cracks will be. You have to wait 60 minutes, I think it says, dry approximately 60 minutes or more depending on the humidity in your area, so it might take a little bit longer. And then apply a coat of whatever you want, light buttermilk, winter blue would be a nice color on top of your crackling medium. Now the one thing about when you apply with your paint on your crackling medium, you want to have a generous amount of paint on your brush and lay it flat, and I would use a much larger brush than this, and lay it flat, and you can't go back over. You can't touch up and try and, you know, fix spots if you didn't get a lot of paint there, you know, or, you know, a nice coating of paint there, because you will remove the crackling medium. So that is one way, and I do have other videos on my YouTube channel that show how to use the weathered wood crackling medium. But on this one, I want to apply, to decoupage some paper on there, because so many great papers you can find, you know, at Hobby Lobby, Joann's, Michael's, Walmart. I mean, you can just find some great papers, scrapbooking papers put on here. You could also use wrapping paper. So you have tons of options when it comes to creating a background on here. So some of the papers that I have, I'll show you some of the ones that I had picked out for this background. One was this one. I don't know where I got this. It is very thin paper, and you can actually see through it, but it's speckly, and it's thicker than tissue paper, but not as thick as wrapping paper, so I'm not really sure where I got that, but that is a good option. Then we have like I have some speckled papers. Now some of these papers I have had for years and years, and I don't know how long I've had them, where I got them, but I've got these speckly ones, purple, green, and blue, and I think the blue would be nice. Actually, any of these would work well for this design. And I have some paper that has like old postcards on the back, which that is a very fun paper. Looks very old, aged, antique-y. I have, I can grab it out of my hand here. I have this one. It's not big enough. I'm sure I probably have another piece of it, which I thought was fun. I really liked the movement in the background, plus it's got some crackling going on in it. Gives it a little aged look. I have this one that I really love because it looks like worn metal, old metal, and I was originally going to use this one because I really love the look of the background, and I still might use that one. I'm not 100% sure which one I'm going to use today. Then another one that I thought would be super fun. This is just an old type print. And I'm pretty sure I got this at Hobby Lobby not that long ago. So most of these papers are the Paper Studio, which is Hobby Lobby. But this is a super fun one, and then you could kind of antique wash over the background with, you know, some wash medium in a black color or a gray color. And then I have all of these other papers that are like kind of like the weathered wood. This one's not as much, and it's got a border on it, so it wouldn't work because that border would only be on part of our design. And then I have a green and a blue one. You can see the crackling. This is how the look that you will get if you use the milk chocolate, the weathered wood, and the winter blue color. You'll get this look on your surface, which is so cool. So if you don't have scrapbooking paper handy, you can use the weathered wood. And then I have these two here, which are, this one's just slightly lighter than this one. And this is the one I was thinking of going with. So my choices that I chose were these two. And I really like both of them. I think this one would just make a wonderful a sign look. But I think I'll stick with this one. We'll still go with the weathered wood look on this one. So I'll set these other papers aside. And so this piece, my surface, is my medium Chippendale plaque. And so this piece just barely fits this surface. So it will fit, but it is going to be a tight fit here on the paper. So I want to get it lined up on my paper so I can see a little bit of the paper underneath it. Oops. And what I'm going to do is draw around it. And hopefully I got the whole thing. Yep, got the whole thing. Let's make sure it fit on here. It's going to be a tight fit. So then I'm just going to cut it out with my scissors, and we are going to adhere it. I'm going to cut right on that line. I'm going to try and stay right on it and not go. If you want to go outside of the line, that's better than going inside of the line, because we can always trim off the excess. We want this to fit as tight on the surface as possible. So just take your time, cut either on it or to the, just barely to the outside of it. There we go. There is no rush in cutting this out. Take your time. And if you're going to do the crackling medium, then, you know, go ahead and follow the directions. Like I said, apply your base coat of milk chocolate, and then once it's dry, your crackling medium. A nice generous coat. I would put it thick in some areas. If you put it too thin, you'll have just tiny little cracks in it. So it's really up to you what size of cracking you would like to have in your paint. And then paint the top coat either with winter blue or buttermilk or light buttermilk. This is probably This is probably close to a buttermilk color, this one here. Okay, I've got it cut out. I've got some scrap paper laying down here so I don't make a super big mess on my surface here. I'll bring my piece back over and make sure we're going to fit. Alright, looks like it's going to fit. It's going to be close. We'll probably antique the edges, so I'm not going to worry about if any of the surface shows through after I apply it. So we want to apply some decoupage medium on here. Decoupage for paper is the one that I like to use. Now you can dump some out on a plate and apply it with a damp sponge, but I just tend to just brush it on. Be somewhat generous, but not too super generous. We don't want soupy on here. And I'm going to move extremely quickly if I can, because I have my ceiling fan on and I don't want it to start drying this decoupage medium before I can get my paper on. Your edges is where it will lift, so make sure you get a good amount on your edges. We don't want it running over the edges, but we do need it to adhere well to the edges. So those are places you want to definitely make sure that you get a good coat on there. And you can apply it to the back of the paper too, but it will stick quicker if you apply it to both. But I want to make sure I have time to adjust just slightly if I need to. Okay, and you do not want to touch the paper once you have decoupage, or try not to touch it. Stuck down already. Okay, so then we want to take something and smooth out the paper. You just want to bray it down. You can use one of these rolling brayers if you have one, or you can just use an old credit card, but you want to make sure you don't dig it into the paper. That's where you'll tear it. And I need a little bit more here on my edges. I can tell they're not wanting to stay down very well, so I'm going to put some on there. Really smoothing those edges down. Get them to stick to the board. I'm not really sure where I got this little piece of plastic. Had it for quite a while. I'm sure it came in something I purchased, but and I can't remember if I said this is my medium Chippendale size plaque from my website. Alright, I want to make sure I don't have any bubbles. In my paper. The thicker that you apply the decoupage medium, the more likely you will have bubbles or bumps behind it, and most of them should smooth out when it dries, or you can rub them out and kind of push them down. And then we're going to apply a coat of decoupage medium on the paper. And then we'll let it dry completely. I'm going to use a brush. You can use a sponge. I'm going to move quickly. That doesn't feel like it's stuck there. And I'm going to move as quick as I can so I can smooth this out as I go. I don't want to leave any thick decoupage medium on here. And I probably should have grabbed a little bit bigger brush than what I have here. But a sponge will also make sure that you keep a nice thin layer on here. Okay, got some bubbles here. This is where you want to try and not touch your paper, because you've got the decoupage medium on the surface now. And if you touch it too much with your fingers are going to get stuck to the paper, and then you could tear your paper. It could lift your paper. So once you get everything on there, you want to try not to mess with it or handle it or anything. If when it's dry you have some bubbles in here, like I'm going to have one right there. Looks like it's not sticking well to the edge. You can take a straight pen and just poke that bubble, and then take a little bit of the decoupage medium and apply it to that place and kind of, you know, push it down on there, and it should be just fine. So we're going to get this dry, and then I'm going to look and make sure there's nothing hanging over the edges. If there is, I'm going to show you how to clean those edges up and get it all nice and smooth. I really want a more kind of weathered, aged look with this piece, so we'll definitely do some distressing around the edges. Okay, mine is dry now, so I'm going to grab my cutting mat and lay it on here. And I do have some that's hanging over, not so much on this end, just a little bit, and I'm surprised I have quite that much hanging over. So I laid it on my cutting mat, and I'm going to make sure that I stay on my cutting mat when I cut. And I've got a sharp blade here. You can use an X-Acto knife or a utility knife, something that has a very nice sharp blade. This one I've had forever, but you can still buy them at Walmart. I don't know if the dollar store carries this particular kind or not, but it's the kind that you can break. Just use a pair of pliers and break off a piece when it starts getting dull and move on to a sharper edge. So I'm going to trim all my paper around my surface. Making sure I stay on my cutting board here. I'll go back and catch any places that the blade, whoops, started cutting to my board there. I don't want to do that. The blade might have lifted. Especially going around some of these curves, you might accidentally lift the tip of the blade and then not cut all the way through. And I kind of have my blade tilted at an angle slightly so I won't catch the wood, and I can get my blade right up next to the wood and trim that paper. across this one because apparently I didn't cut all the way through. And got a little piece here. You also, when it's drying, before it gets completely dry, want to flip it over and make sure you didn't have any glue run over. I had some run over right here, and we don't want that. So while the glue is wet, you can take your brush and your damp brush and get that glue off. We don't want the glue to be on the edges of the board, if at all possible. And I did not do that step, so make sure that you do that with yours. Okay, that looks pretty good. A little place right there. And we call that good. So let me get all of my paper shavings out of the way here. Cutting board up. And we are going to work on getting this ready. So, this particular pattern, let me get my easel out here, I have created a stencil for. So, but if you do not want to purchase the stencil, you can just trace your pattern onto your tracing paper and we'll go from there. Okay, I'm going to be using my stencil. I created a stencil just for this design. So I've got my chicken here, my eggs, fresh eggs, 2 cents a dozen, farmer's market. So I'm going to center it in here. I don't think my lettering is quite centered here. Let me check it. Nope. So I'm going to move the words over and stencil farmer's market on first, and then I'll come down and do the other stuff. Okay, that's pretty close right there. I'm going to tape my stencil down. And a couple of places here. Check it, make sure I didn't move it. Okay, we're good to go there. Okay, but if you are just going to transfer on, then you'll want to trace your pattern and transfer it on with some gray graphite. We're going to paint the word farmers, fresh eggs, 2 cents a dozen, all with soft black. We're going to do market with country red, and our eggs and our chicken are going to be undercoated with bleach sand. So we're going to do that. So let me grab my paints out on my palette. Bleach sand for the chicken and the eggs, but we're not going to do them yet. We're just going to do the word farmers up here first. So let me get my soft black out. Now I'm going to stencil with a makeup sponge, but you can use a stencil brush. You can use a pouncer like this, a fingertip dauber, and do it with a fingertip dauber. There's lots of different options for applying your paint, but I generally use a makeup sponge, so that's what I'm going to be using here. And I want to not get paint in the word market, so I am going to put a piece of tape across that word. I didn't quite fill it. And make sure that I don't get paint where that word is, and then I'll just take that tape off here in a second. So we want to do farmers. I'm going to use a makeup sponge. Now, makeup sponges are not absorbent, so I'm going to grab a little bit of paint and pull it out and work the sponge. I would rather do several light layers as opposed to a lot of paint, because the paint on a makeup sponge does not soak up in there. It kind of just disperses along the end of it. So I'm just going to tap and get some paint on the end of it there. And it's enough to come off and get on me, but it's not oozing paint. So we're just going to tap straight up and down. Try not to go over your edge there of your stencil. So if you think that you might, put a piece of tape there. And we'll do this a couple of times with this soft black. We're also going to paint in the words fresh eggs with this color, but I don't want to do that right now because I'm going to move the stencil and adjust it a little bit. So I will make sure that I have the stencil when I cut it for whoever purchases it. For it to be cut, the stencil can be adjusted to make sure that the farmer's market is centered on the top. Because my chicken's too close over here, I don't mind where the fresh eggs is, so maybe I'll just move my chicken over just a little bit. I'll see how it looks in the program. A little bit of paint at a time, straight up and down pouncing. And I may put the stencil back on later and antique these letters a little bit. But for now we just want to get them in here with this color. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to take my tape off of my word market. I need my farmers to be dry. I'm going to grab a smaller makeup sponge. I use my makeup sponges till there's nothing. I just keep them in a cup. And the smaller ones I use for smaller areas. So I'm going to get my country red out and put a little bit of that out on my palette. And use my smaller sponge here and get a little bit of it. And I'm going to paint this letter in with some red. You can do it all in soft black. It's perfectly fine. I just kind of want to mix it up a little bit. So if you're applying your pattern and not using the stencil, then you just paint your lettering in using a small round brush. I was just a 1 round for the word market and probably a 3 round for the word farmers. Tapping on very light layers here. When I'm done with my stencil, I'll take it to my sink and apply a coat of hand sanitizer just all over the stencil and let it set for a minute or so, and then go in and everything will wash away. Use a very soft toothbrush. Okay, there we go. Farmer's Market. I like how that lettering looks old like that. Okay, so I want to lift my stencil now. So we got Farmer's Market on there, looking pretty good so far, and I want to adjust for my chicken here. So let's take our measurements. So I'm measuring in this curve area. So right at an inch. Let's go that way. That's pretty close right there. Okay, back to our soft black. I want to put fresh eggs, 2 cents a dozen, with soft black. Straight up and down tapping. Don't mush it or rub it or swirl it. The only time you can swirl it is if you're using an actual stencil brush. And then with a stencil brush you apply it in a circular motion on your letters. Okay? Very gently. Little bit of paint at a time. Just tap it on there. A little bit here on this. Let's see how this looks. 2 cents a dozen. Looks pretty good. Alright, now for our chicken or hen and our eggs, we're going to use bleach sand. If I can get any to come out of my bottle, it's about empty. Oops. I have it all over me. Okay, I got a different makeup sponge. And again, I'm going to just pull some out onto that sponge and tap it. Disperse it across there. And I'm going to tap in the whole chicken. This color, this is our undercoat color for our chicken. Let's see, bleach sand, I probably could have went with like a buttermilk, but we'll stay with this one. We'll stay with it for now. I might change it. So if you are putting in your chicken by hand, paint in the all of the body with the bleach sand, and the feet and the beak we'll paint in with some I'm not sure what yellow yet. The red areas will be the country red. I'll have to think about the yellow area, what I want on there. And I think I might grab a buttermilk because I don't know if that's going to be dark enough to start with. Let's base the beak and the feet with moon yellow. We'll put some buttermilk out here and see if it's... So it's a slightly more yellow color. And I think adding our highlights to this might work out a little bit better. So we will do buttermilk on the chicken. So if you're using the stencil, the whole thing's just going to be done in buttermilk, and then we'll come back and add our lines in where everything goes and paint in. Now the feet down here, you could actually go ahead and stencil them, but I'm not going to. I'm going to wait till I get my pattern lines on there so I know exactly where the feet start. So we're going to do a couple of coats of this buttermilk on here. The bleach sand just was not dark enough for me. So that's one coat of buttermilk on top of that bleach sand, but I know I'm going to have to do it again. So we're getting a nice stencil on there. Make sure it's dry, because if it's not dry, since we're putting very thin layers on here, it should dry very quickly, but if it's not dry, I'll just start lifting the paint, and I don't want to lift the paint. So okay, let's see how that looks. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to remove my stencil and set it aside in case we need to put it back on here and you know, do some antiquing on our letters. I am going to remove the tape so it doesn't stick to something else on my table here, and just lay it aside. I will clean it at the end when I am completely done with everything. So we've got all of our base coats, undercoats in. So I'm going to get my chicken completely dry and add in my line so we can come back and start adding in some base coats on our chicken. Okay, all of our base coats are on here. We're ready to start adding some details to this. We're going to work on the eggs first. So I'm going to grab some cool white because it's got a little bit of a blue tint to it. And grab your favorite floating brush. Mine happens to be a curved flat or a soft curve. If you have one from the Brush Guys, it's a soft curve. If you have one from Low Cornell, which they no longer make these, but it's called a curved flat, but they're the exact same brush. This is the one from Low Cornell, and this is the one from, they're different sizes obviously, but this is the one from the Brush Guys. So the brand of it is Silver Silk 88 Soft Curve. This one's a size 12 right here. Great brushes. I highly recommend you getting them. They really have helped a lot of my students on their floating techniques. So we're going to side load for a float. So let me spritz my palette with some water on this side. Always have water. That's my clean water. When I need to float, I go right over here and grab some drops of water over here. I dip the square or the pointed side into my water. Now you can use a flat brush, an angle brush, whatever brush is your favorite brush for floating. This is my favorite brush, so that's why I'm using it. Okay, so I drew some lines on here, and if you transferred on your lines and they're very dark, you might want to just erase them back just a little bit. And we're going to float this color on the top of the eggs. On the egg, not the background. I really love this paper on this background. I think it is really a great choice, and I'm going to be antiquing it here when we get done painting everything in. Do each egg on the top. See if I can erase that pencil line right there. I might not be able to since I've painted, but that's a mess. Okay, this is my tri-eraser that I use, and I sell those on my website if you are interested in having one. I do not ever paint without it. You make a small error, as long as the paint isn't cured with a little bit of water and that eraser and very gentle pressure, you can remove any little boo-boos. Now one of the good things about painting on this paper, that I sealed it first with that decoupage, and so now if I get some on the background, I can just wipe it off. Okay, that's our first start for our eggs. We'll let them dry for a minute. I'm going to paint in the legs and the beak with some moon yellow. Going to use a round brush. Got a 3 round here, whatever brush that you like to use, that where you can get in the area. And I know the chicken's feet are very fat in this painting, but that's okay. It's got a little dew claw there. This is a fun chicken. We don't have to be super exact on it. A little dew claw here. And I'm going to see if I can mix a color to match the background, where I can fix some areas that I don't like. Okay, that is the moon yellow. Let's do country red on the wattle. Same round brush here. And it'll take a couple of coats. But with our undercoating on there, it makes everything go a little bit faster. And the under part down here. Okay, I haven't got my second coats on any of this yet. I'm going to go back over here to my eggs. I'm going to shake my cool white up a little bit better than what I had it here. Fresh out. And I'm going to put a little bit of the buttermilk out. And because that was our undercoat color. And a little bit of raw sienna for some shading on the eggs. Okay, so I want to go with my cool white. Actually, I think I'll take a little bit of my buttermilk color and just tap a little bit of it into the center of this egg right here. Wipe my brush off, as much paint as possible. Side load for a float with the cool white. And try and work those two together while it's still wet. Wipe my brush off and get just a tiny little bit of the raw sienna on my brush, and it's mixing with what paint is left in there. And that's not quite dark enough, but we'll come back and do some more there. So some buttermilk here in the center. Wipe my brush off and load for a float with the cool white. And bring it down and blend it with that buttermilk. Too much paint on my brush, so I just went and wiped it on my paper towel. It was like massive amounts. I'm going to let that one dry before I add the raw sienna. So I'm going to put a little bit of buttermilk in there and wipe my brush off. I just had it on the toe of my brush because I don't want the paint going all the way across and interfering with my float. Wash my brush. This one here is going to need some more cool white. And we'll go into some raw sienna. Work that into my brush a little bit. And we'll apply a little bit of it down here on the bottom and the left side of our egg. And we'll grab a mop brush. This is not one of my good mop brushes, so let me get one of my good ones, and the paint's already dry, so get some water, dampen that. Right there I have a little bit of a hard edge. Try not to have very much paint on your brush. I feel like I've got just a tad bit too much here. And mop it out while it's wet so that it will soften back. Now this one has 2 coats and this one has 1, so you can see the difference there. let's do a second quick coat on here. Not very much paint at all on your brush. It's going to be a lot more water than there is paint, because this is a pretty intense color here, and we don't want it to take over our eggs. We're going to come back with the cool white one more time. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to come back with my cool white. And I think I might get a little bit of Snow White. I might highlight with some Snow White because cool white is more blue. So pity pat, kind of blend it down. You've got the water on your brush, like you should have for floating, then it's going to lay the water down in there, and as you move your brush with the paint along, it's going to soften and blend it in there. So learning how to float, I know a lot of people struggle with that, but it's really learning the feel of your brush, how it feels as you paint the stroke in, and being able to judge when your brush needs more water in it. If it's dragging, it's not leaving down nice smooth areas, you've got too much paint in it maybe. There's all kinds of things that can keep your floating from being really nice and soft floats. So it's important to learn how your brush feels as you stroke with it, as you brush with it, as you paint with it, because then you can tell what it needs. And most of the time when mine's dragging or something, I need water. But I know a lot of students load a lot of paint on the very tip of their brush right here. And then they go and try and paint, but they don't have any water over here, or they haven't blended the water and the paint together, because even when you pick up, let me demonstrate, when you pick up paint and just work it like that, you're just working it on one side. And sure, if you take it that way, it might float, but this way you're not going to get anything. So you've got to work the paint into both sides of the brush, but you also need to have water in there. And the paint and the water need to kind of meet in the middle of your bristles, and work that paint until it meets that water and softens right here on your palette. Then when you go to paint, you're going to have just soft, beautiful floats, and you can walk them out because you've got water in your brush. So I hope that helps some of you that have difficulties with floating. Okay, so I want to add some white on top of this. So it's just Snow White. There. I'm going to put it at the very top, maybe a little bit down the side. We just want to brighten up our eggs just a little bit. We don't want it to go over the whole egg. Pretty good. We're going to float, kind of do a shading underneath those, and I can see over here on this this egg, I didn't get all the way to the edge out here. And it kind of bugs me. Still. Well, I'm not sure I'm getting it, so hopefully when I float underneath it will take care of it. This little section right here, I think it's going to need just a little bit more of the raw sienna. This is a little V right here, so we want to push some of this color into that V. Push it in there, then round it out and smooth it and blend it. And we'll do the same thing here. Push it into the corner, bring it out, round it out. That softens that little V area and makes the roundness more where you can see, you can tell it's a round object. If you leave it too flat, then you're not going to see the roundness there. Okay, I think our eggs look pretty good. So we might come back and do a little bit more lighter color on those in a little bit, but I want to get the chicken going. I think I'm going to get the second coat on the wattle. I haven't done that yet. Thin your paint with a little bit of water. Your second coat should never be straight paint. It should be mixed, well actually all your coats should be mixed with water. Should never use just straight paint because it's too thick. So I'll mix it with water. The second coat is just kind of filling in gaps where the first coat didn't quite cover like it should. So, you know, you're just really just doing a heavy wash of paint there. And then the beak. The feet. These are very, very fat feet. I'm going to erase that pencil line there because I think we kind of get the idea of how these feet go. Okay, we got both of our coats on there. Erase some lines if I can. If I paint it over them, I'm not going to be able to, so I'll have to work it out with shading and stuff. Okay, coming along nicely here. Oh. The beak will have a line in it, like where the mouth is. I'm not sure you can even see that. There you go. The beak comes down a little bit to a point here. A smaller brush so I can paint that in. Too long of a beak now. That's better. That's a better beak. Mucho better. Alright, we're going to start working on this chicken now. Alright, I'm going to use a filbert brush. And the first thing we want to do is put some of these tail feathers in. So I'm going to load up with some, I think I'll load up with cool white. I think we'll start with cool white and then we can lighten them a little bit with some snow white. So load your brush up with some cool white. And I want you to be on the chisel edge, not the flat edge, the chisel edge. So if you've got it like this, turn it like this. And we're going to, actually, no, let's leave it on the flat edge because I want these feathers back here to be a little fatter. And we're just going to touch the edge of where the tail feathers are and pull down. And stroke these in like this. We'll come back and define them a little bit more. Let's add some light colored ones out here. On the tip of the wing and maybe along down here. And we'll be up on the chisel edge now, and we'll pull some white ones through here. We'll be covering these up mostly, but we want a little bit of lightness through there. And I think that's going to be a good start for our cool white on our little chicken here. Okay, let's put out some burnt sienna and some raw sienna, and we're going to use those colors now. And we might dip into some moon yellow when you've already got all of that on your palette. So this is burnt sienna, and I'm going to stroke some of this in here. Go pick up a little bit of raw sienna. Some of that in here. And I'm on the chisel edge for this. There's a little bit of water in my brush. I'm going to put some raw sienna ones in, coming in here. Now I'm going to go back into the burnt sienna. We're just kind of layering some strokes in here, right up to that white. I'm going to go into some moon yellow now and start adding some yellow in here. And you kind of want to work wet into wet and let these colors really work together. Let's get some of the moon yellow onto the wing. So it's really best to work a little bit at a time. I'm going to go back into some of the raw sienna and kind of work that into that yellow. We're going to come back in and touch our white up here. And a little bit of burnt sienna up here. Wipe my brush off and grab a little bit more of the yellow, which is going to blend with the paint that's on my brush, so it's going to make a little bit of a different color. And we'll come back and do a second layer on here, so this is going to be a layering process. Okay, let's see if I can mix some raw sienna with some white. Nope, that's going to be too pinky orange or something. I don't know. Not color I like. Alright, let's add some of this color in here. This is raw sienna. I was trying to mix it with a lighter color. It wasn't kind of working out so well. So I'm going to wipe my brush and go into the, actually that was burnt sienna. I'm going to go into the raw sienna. Definitely need more water in my brush. More paint. Alright, wipe your brush off, go into some moon yellow. So this is just a back and forth, picking up different colors, wiping your brush off. Wet blending to get some nice colors. Let's see, on the leg down here, we're going to start here and pull this direction. I'm going to wipe my brush off because I've got too much yellow mixed in there. Get me some fresh burnt sienna out. And you can go down to a smaller filbert brush if you need to. Alright, now I got some more of the raw sienna. Grab a little bit of yellow. Wipe your brush off. I like for you to wipe your brush off in between. There's still going to be some paint in there and it's all going to blend, but alright, our chicken's looking pretty good. I'm going to stay with the burnt sienna up here in the upper feathers. We're going to go over that white area, kind of leave a little bit of it showing. Pick up a little bit of raw sienna, give it a little bit of a color change. I want the burnt sienna back here on the back of the head. But I would like for to have a little bit of the moon yellow coming up here close to the eye. So we have our first layer of our feathers on. So this gives us a really good base to start with. I think it's going to be a good start. I'm going to wash my brush out now. Alright, while our chicken is doing its drying thing, let's put another float of white over here on our eggs. And I'm going to work this white all the way down our egg, because we want our eggs to be white. We don't want them to be brown eggs. You could paint yours brown eggs, that would be perfectly fine. It's a Snow White, and I'm working it all the way into our floated shadow so that we can take it down just a little bit and keep the eggs white but still look like they have a little bit of shadow on them. But I want you to start on the light part of the egg with your float so that by the time you get down to the shadow area, there's not going to be much paint left in your brush, and you can kind of blend it into the shadow a little bit easier. Not completely obliterate all of your work. And so that looks a little bit more natural there. I like that much better. Okay, I've let all my paint dry up, so let's get going on this some more. I'm going to grab my filbert brush back out. And I'm going to get my cool white out. My burnt sienna, my raw sienna, and my moon yellow. Alright, we are going to do wet into wet technique here. So I'm going to start with my cool white, and I am not cleaning my brush between colors. So we're going to apply cool white again back here. Wipe your brush off, go into some burnt sienna, and I think I'll bring it up this way, blend it into that white just a little bit. Wipe my brush off, grab a little bit more of the burnt sienna. Begin working in, wipe off, get raw sienna. And we're going to move fairly quickly here. Go into some raw sienna. Wiping my brush off, I'm going to grab some moon yellow and put some of that in here. Wipe off, I'm going to get some fresh moon yellow. It's blending a little bit too much with the other colors. And now back into the burnt sienna and blend a little bit where that yellow has joined into the feathers. Alright, let's go to our wing. I'm going to grab some cool white. I wiped my brush off, but I did not wash it. Wipe your brush off, go into some raw sienna, and blend that into the white just a little bit. Wipe my brush off, grab some of the burnt sienna. Wipe my brush off, grab some moon yellow, and moon yellow on the outside edge of the wing. I'm going to wipe my brush off, get a little bit more of burnt sienna, and blend that into our wing. So again, we're working wet into wet paint here. Too much yellow in there, so I'm going to take it back with some raw sienna. And I want a little bit more burnt sienna through here. So you can just continue to play with the colors and work them into the design where you feel like it looks, whoops, that was a lot of paint. Works the best. I'm going to wipe my brush off as much paint as possible and get the cool white. And blend that in there just a little bit. I'm going to do that on the wing too. The wing kind of lost its white edge. Wash that this time. I really want my raw sienna to, I think I'll pull it into the white. Let it kind of feather or fade out to there. And I want to go along the outside edge of the wing. got raw sienna down here. And you can make your chicken a white chicken if you want. I almost made this one a white chicken, but then I decided at the last minute to change that. I'm going to grab some raw sienna. That was burnt sienna. Now I'm grabbing some raw sienna in here. Put some of this on the legs. And then our chest feathers. I think I'm going to wash my brush and grab some moon yellow. And put some moon yellow on the chest. We'll make it just a little bit brighter. I'm just kind of making up my colors of my chicken, so if you're a chicken farmer and you know best what chicken should look like, go for it. Just go back and forth between those colors that you have on your palette, which is cool whites on the edge, and then we have burnt sienna, raw sienna, and moon yellow. I'm going to put a little bit in there. I hope you're staying on camera because I haven't looked up at the video one single time. You're probably yelling at me and everything. I apologize if I was off camera. Alright, let's finish up with our neck feathers here. I think I'm going to lay in the cool white first. Right along through here. Alright. Wipe my brush off, grab some of the raw sienna and pull some of that into our white and above our white. And a little bit of the, this is the raw sienna. That I just used was burnt sienna, so I think I'm getting them confused here a little bit, so I'm probably totally confusing you. That was raw sienna. Now we're doing some burnt sienna, which is the more orange of the two. The other one is a little more brown and gold. Alright, pull some of this up on the back into the top of the head. Wipe my brush off and grab some moon yellow. I want some moon yellow where the face is, where the eye is going to be. And then I'm going to get some raw sienna. Put this up here. I'm going to work it down and around. I'm going to have to touch up on my red. Okay, he's a pretty good looking little chicken here. And wherever you feel like you need to add some extra color, you could bring some of that red in here. Let's get some of the red that we put up in the bottle, because we're going to touch that up anyway. So let's get some out and just put a few of these strokes in here, some red. A little bit more red. Ooh, for a lot of red. That was like way too much red. Let's put some on the wing here. Some of that burnt sienna. Kind of fix this a little bit. Okay, he's a nice little chicken here. We might wash some color over him here in a little bit. Do a little bit of floating. I'm going to take a little bit of that cool white. I really want to streak some back in here. Washed my brush off. I think I'll put a little bit where I have my yellows. So I've got some yellow in here. A little bit of yellow in through here. So we can add a little bit of a highlight. I have to do it a couple times because that's really going to fade down in there. A little bit here in the front. I'm up on the very tip of this brush, just giving some light, little easy strokes. So just play around with it and have some fun. That might have been just a tad bit too much white. Now that I look at it on camera, could have been just a bit too much. Okay, I'm gonna have to leave the chicken alone for now till we're ready to do some shading. His this kind of bugs me though. Kind of even it up. This is just going to be a fun little sign. We're not trying to get lifelike by any means. We are not doing lifelike. So don't go there with the lifelike because that's not what we're going for, unless that's what you want. So okay, let's work on the wattle and comb. Okay, let's work a little bit more on our chicken here. I'm going to work on the wattle and comb and the beak and the feet before we finish up our chicken. So let's get some alizarin crimson and some soft black out on our palette. We'll use those as our shading colors, and we'll get some tangelo orange. That will be a highlight color. And maybe a little bit of Snow White. Those are colors for our wattle. Now for our beak, we want to get out some raw sienna for shading color for it. And then we'll use the soft black if we need to, and the white for highlight. So I'm going to grab my curved flat or soft black, so whatever brush you like to shade with, grab that brush, spritz my palette with some water, and we're going to mix our cranberry wine and our soft black to get a dark, like burgundy color. And we're going to shade next to the head here. And at the back here. And we will shade underneath the beak. Okay, we'll let that dry. And we probably will repeat that. So let's go work on the beak. We're going to take some raw sienna. And we're going to float this color along the bottom of the beak. Zoom in just a scooch. And on the beak next to feathers. And I'm going to do around where the two toes are, where this claw thing is. These are very small little floats. I'm going to separate some toes here along the bottom. And I think we'll do along this edge right here and this edge. We're going to go, this should be dry now, so we can go next to the head and the wattle. And I want to create a separation here. So I'm going to stay up on the very tip of my brush, and you can do this with a liner brush if you want, and create a little bit of a, I want it to be more swerving like the beak is. Kind of create the separations in the beak there. This is going to get our first shading on here. And I almost completely filled that beak, so let me see if I can remove a little bit of that right through there. We want it to stay the yellow that we painted it right through there. We're going to put a highlight in there. Alright, let us deepen our shading here with the alizarin crimson and a little bit of soft black. Just mix it on your brush. And we're going to go again along back here. Underneath the beak. Alright, now for our deeper shading on our legs and feet, I'm going to take that raw sienna, and I did come back and put a little bit of shading on the right sides of the legs. I'm going to get a tiny little bit of soft black in there just to darken that just slightly. And repeat this.
I say slightly, I mean I want you to add the tiniest dot of soft black imaginable, because we don't want it to take over. Go up here and do our beak. And this is where you want to be extra careful with your adding your soft black. We don't want it to. I'm going to go along this little mouth line that I put here up on the very tip of my brush. Now when you do your floating on your beak, you want to do each space individually and allow it to dry. So you'll want to, and I had just a small tiny bit of paint on my brush there. You want to do like under the wattle, let it dry, go down, work on the feet, come back, do next to the head, let it dry, come back, and then come back and do the mouth. I'm going to erase a little bit right here again, because that's such a small area. Our paint is going to get over on that very, very quickly. Okay, let's do some highlighting here. On our find my paintbrush there for a second. On our wattle, comb and wattle, we're going to highlight with some Tangelo orange on it. And we might add some of this orange into our chicken feathers. Can't recall if I added that in or not. So we want to do that, give it a little bit of orange tint. We can't really see it at first, so don't get too excited if you can't really see too much of the orange at first. Okay? Then on our beak and our legs, we're going to use some white. And we're going to put some claws on this guy here in a second. So we're going to put white on the left side. And I need some white on the feet a little bit. And if the white is too bright for you at first, you can add a little bit of moon yellow in there with it and tone it down. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Let's go up here on the beak, and I want out here to have a highlight on the edge of the beak, not on the wattle. And then a little bit down here on this edge, or maybe above the mouth line that we created there. This is a very small area, so work with whatever brush you're comfortable working with. Don't let it get too carried away from you. Okay, let's put some little claws on the feet. Grab a small round or a small detail brush. We're going to come back and work on the wattle and comb here in a second. And we just want to create some little triangles. On there. Just some little, this is with soft black. I don't know if I said that or not, but this is with soft black. Okay, then up on the beak, we're just going to add a little, my paint is Feeling very transparent all of a sudden. Put a little dot right there on the beak. And let's go back up to our wattle and do another layer of tangelo orange. And then we'll come back and add a brighter highlight. But I think the second coat of this tangelo orange. And try not to have tons of water in your brush so it's not thinning down the paint too much. We want to see that orange on there. Okay, I want to do one more thing to the legs. I want to thin down some soft black with some water to inky consistency. Or some raw sienna. We might do raw sienna. Soft black might be too dark, so let's just mix the two. A little bit of soft black, a little bit of raw sienna, maybe a little bit more soft black. And we'll just create some little lines on the legs and feet. These are very, very fine lines, so if you don't feel like you are proficient enough with a detail liner to get some super fine lines in there, you got to have inky consistency, thinned paint, not a lot of paint or water, in your brush, and then just up on the very tippy toe of this brush, leave some lines on there. Give it a little bit more detail on there. Okay, I feel like my beak kind of got washed out, so I'm going to add a new color in here. I'm going to add cadmium yellow and just wash a little bit of that over the beak. And we'll put a little bit on our feet, kind of down the center of them, and make them just a little bit brighter yellow. I'll come back and do just a bright white highlight on here with my detail liner. Instead of floating it, I'll just try to paint it on there. And make that mouth line slightly darker. Okay, if you need to go back over your claws, we can do that. Put a second coat on there, just very quickly tap it on there. Okay, I think that yellow really helped a lot. So I want to add some yellow and some orange maybe into our chicken a little bit here. Okay, before we add color into our chicken, let's finish our highlight up here. So I'm going to take my tangelo orange and my cadmium yellow and mix them together and get a little bit brighter color here. And down here on the wattle. Let that dry a little bit and come back and brighten it. So let's add some orange strokes. I especially want some in here. They don't look like they're going to show up too much, so I'm going to grab some of the cadmium yellow, put some of those. On the ends out here, we might add some of this cat yellow. And I'll probably have to do it a couple times because cad yellow is pretty transparent. And it doesn't always want to show up well the first time you apply it. So let's put some down here on the chest. And some on the wing. And some right through there. I'm going to repeat on the chest here. I want it to be brighter. And I'm up on the very tip of my brush, the very edge of it, just very lightly, just lightly stroking. Not leaving a lot of paint behind. We don't want to get carried away here. Okay, I'm going to go into my Tangelo orange. I'm not going to clean my brush, so don't clean it. Just pick up the orange, and we'll add some orange in here. And again, I'm up on the very tip of my brush, just leaving a little bit of paint behind. Again, you're just going to go back and forth between your colors, and this is just adding some extra color and highlight onto our project here. We're not trying to cover up all of the colors that we already put on here, so don't be trying to do that. That's not the goal here. This is just to add another fun dimension into the project, and like I said, I am barely letting any of this paint come off of the brush. So it's just some subtle colors in there. Let's do the wattle again. I'm going to go with straight cad yellow this time. And you know, when you with each highlight, it gets a smaller and smaller area. You don't want to fill up the area that you did previously. And I think that'll be good on our wattle there. A little bit more cad yellow. Okay, we're looking pretty good. Now we're ready to do some shading and stuff on our chicken, and then we're going to work on more in the background. Okay, let's start adding some shading on our chicken. I'm going to move up to a larger curved flat, so you might want to move up to a larger angle brush or a larger flat brush, whatever you are shading with. We're going to side load for a float with soft black. And I might add a little bit of raw sienna in there, just take it down for our first shading. So let's do about an equal mix. And if it's too dark, then add a little bit more of the raw sienna to kind of cut that soft black a little bit. And we're going to go next to our wattle here, or our comb. We'll go around our wattle and beak. We want to create an eye area here in a minute, but we're going to get this taken care of first. We want to do a little bit kind of underneath our neck feathers, just to kind of lift them up a little bit. Mix a little bit more on my brush. I'm going to go around the wing. Here, I'm just going to kind of jiggle and wiggle back here. I want to do the right side of the legs. We're going to go right here and separate the chest from this leg. Back here on this edge. Just very loosely tap it in there. We don't want to lose the fact that that's feathers. Do a little bit along the back and the back of the head, just a little bit. And we'll darken a few places with just some soft black. I did not clean my brush out, so if it still has some of that raw sienna in there, that's okay. And I want to make this kind of a dark area where the eye is going to be a little bit darker. Okay, that is our shading there. All right, let's add some highlights on here. We're going to take our raw sienna and mix some cadmium yellow in with it. So it's going to be 2 to 3 cad yellows with 1 raw sienna. And we're going to highlight, maybe add just a touch of white in there. So 1, 1, and 3. And you can get your filbert out and do this in strokes. And I don't really like that. That's looking too chalky. So let's just take that off. I think we'll just add some strokes of white on here. And that will be good enough. So let's grab your filbert brush and add some white. And a little bit down through here. And brighten up the tips of our wings here. Just with a little bit. I'm still just up on the very tip, just kind of tickling that in. So I'm not leaving a whole lot behind. I think I'm going to go back in here with some light color. I put that dark color in there, but I'm not really liking it. So just add some lighter colors in here. Bit along the front of the legs. Okay, I think that makes our chicken look pretty good. Let's add his eye in here. We're going to add that with some soft black. We're just going to make a little oval in here, so if you want to draw a little oval, that would be just fine. And I'm just going to kind of tap around it and leave some, almost like he's got a black eye. Wipe my brush off. I'm going to grab my detail liner because I don't want this highlight to be super bright. Actually, I think I might want to put just a tad bit more soft black in there. Right here. And then a dot of white in there. Put a little dot right there on the beak as well. While we have this white, we'll just add some little highlight strokes of white. Make sure we've got everything brightened up. Wide angle out so you can see our chicken. Isn't he cute? Or isn't she cute? Just cute, cute, cute. Okay, we've got our chicken looking cute as can be. I want to add some details around our lettering before we work on the background. Now, first thing I want to do is on my letters, I stenciled them on. But if you don't want the stencil look, I'm going to show you how to take care of that if you're using the stencil. So we're going to take a small round or a detail brush, whichever you feel more comfortable using, and we're going to get some soft black. And now all these bridges that are on our stencil, like right through here, we can just connect those. With our soft black color. And we'll have to do it a couple times because soft black is a little bit transparent. You can do it down here on these words as well. And just close up our gaps. And on the red we can do that. Go back over these letters real quick because they're probably dry already. Okay, so on the red letters, I'm going to grab my detail liner for those because they are smaller letters, and thin my paint just slightly with some water. So right here on the A, we can have it connect. A lot of paint. And the E can connect. And I think those were the only two places on there, so we can connect all those letters. So now we want to add a little bit more detail to our project. So we are going to create a shadow line on these letters. So if you need to draw a line between them, or out beside them, I'm not sure a pencil is going to work. So let me try graphite. We're going to come out away from the letter a little bit. And draw some shadow lines. So we don't want them right next to the letters. And then we'll do the same thing down here on Market. I don't know that we can put a line inside that A. It's going to be tough. But I still want the letters, the lines, to stay away from everything. I want it to look really like an old piece. Now down here we may leave these just as they are. I'm not sure yet. I want to get these letters painted in first. And I'm going to use my small round brush. And then just go on that line that I painted, or that I drew in there. And you might have to repeat this. You can use a detail liner. I'm using a small round, but I don't want you to feel like you have to use what I'm using. So, and I will definitely go over those letters and brighten them up. Down here I think I'm going to go with my detail liner. And because these letters are smaller, thin my paint just a little bit so it will flow off of my detail liner better. Working on the left sides. If you're left-handed, the right sides might be easier for you. Okay, so those look pretty cool. I really like doing my lettering like this, so I'm going to go back over these and darken them. Down. I still got my detail liner because the second coat, I just need to kind of, always with your second coat, you're really just filling in any gaps that the paint didn't leave as solid of a color as what you would like. What a super cool way to do your lettering. I really think that everyone should learn how to do hand lettering if you are able, because it teaches you very good brush control. And I think it is very relaxing to do. Alright, let me go over these. If you don't think you can go back over your same lines, then you can just do it the one time. It will be fine. I'm up on the tip of the brush, not really giving the brush much pressure. And really inside the A and the E should have a line, but it's too small. I can't really get it in there, so I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, I'm going to wide angle it out so you can kind of see that lettering now. Isn't that super cool? I love that look. I think it is just really, really cute. Okay, I'm unsure if I want to highlight on any of the letters. I am going to kind of antique this a little bit, so I might want to highlight once I'm done. First thing we're going to do is shade down around all of our elements here. Okay, I've created a little bit of a shadow color here. It's not dark enough for me, but we'll start with it. So I have mixed 1 burnt sienna, 2 raw sienna, and 1 soft black to get this color. And I've got it thinned down where it's a pretty sheer color of paint. You want to build these layers slowly and not let them get too dark too quick. And it really is just a washy color. Okay, I do want to repeat this. I'm going to add a little bit more soft black in the mix and darken it. Make sure it's dry. And don't lose the shape of your eggs. I feel like I lost a little bit of shape on this one. Okay, so there is our shadow underneath our stuff here. I really feel like I need to do something here. That shape is not quite right. Not sure that's helping. Pretty sure it's not. Alright, I'm just going to leave that egg alone because I feel like I'm just butchering up that shape and shadow. Right here, where these two eggs meet, I really feel like it needs a little bit more shadow on it. So I barely have any soft black on my brush. You don't want to let this get carried away in there. I just wiped it all off. here is the darkest area where these eggs are next to each other, so it's just a little V area, a little shadow there. Come back with my white and clean those highlight edges. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, let's start adding some techniques into our background. I think everything else is ready and finished. I think our chicken is so cute. So let's move on to the background. Okay, so I want to add some color in the background here to kind of age the background a little bit more. So I'm going to take some soft black. Now I've got an old scruffy brush here, and you can use it dry or you can use it slightly damp. So if you're going to use it slightly damp, you'll of course dampen your brush like you normally would, and then you will remove as much moisture as you can into a paper towel. Load your brush. So my brush is dry, but you can, if you just have a damp brush. Now I'm going to remove the paint off the tip of the brush, because that's where the majority of the paint's going to be. Okay, so now actually I'm going to remove a little bit more. I just want a little bit of paint on this brush. We're just going to apply some of this into the background by just dry brushing or dragging it onto the background, kind of dirty it up and age it up and make it look more worn out. I'm going to try not to go over my red letters, but I do want some up there. We're just going to do this wherever we feel like we want to add some aging on here. I mean, this is not all we're going to be doing, so I think this is really going to make it a more interesting background. Alright, do that again in a few places, make it a little bit darker. I'm just barely, I can't even tell you how barely I'm just tickling this brush across here, and whatever paint is on there is coming off. I'm going to give it a little bit more pressure in some areas, but not a whole lot, because I don't want, and I think that looks pretty good. We're going to do some other things here. We're definitely going to age the edges. So one of the other things that I want to do is add some stenciling in the background. I'm going to keep this brush. I just want to put some look of chicken wire. So if you have a chicken wire stencil, you can do this. I just want to do a little bit in the corners. Give it a little bit of a chicken wire look in here. I'm going to go over here to this side, and I may not do the corner on this one. I might come down a little bit and do some down here a little ways. Just kind of hit and miss kind of thing. And look how fun that is looking. Now you want to stay off of your painted areas, so I think I'll put a little bit here in the middle. Okay, and maybe just a little bit at the top up here. Some of this might get covered up when we come in and do our other stuff to it, but isn't that fun? How fun is that? Okay, and we just did that again with the dry brushing with the same brush that we did on the background. And this is a new stencil on my website. It is a larger chicken wire stencil. A lot of them out there have small chicken wire on them, and so I wanted to create one that was bigger wire look. So I just love that look. I think it looks super fabulous. Okay, we want to antique around the edges a little bit, and I'm still thinking about aging the letters down a little bit with some highlight on top of them. This brush I'm going to lay aside. I'm not going to clean it yet, so you want to make sure that you clean it well afterwards because the paint will dry, but this is a really old brush, so I'm not really super worried about it. Okay, now we want to take a dampened artist sponge, or dampened artist sponge is really going to work best for this. You can use a large brush and do this, but I don't know that it will get the quite the same effect. So I've got my dampened artist sponge, and let me get some fresh soft black out, and I will spritz my palette with water, because if the paint is not moving very well for me, I want to grab some water quickly, and clean water. So I'm going to take my sponge and get a little bit of paint on it, just a little bit. I just dipped into there, just barely dipped into it, and pulled some down here, and now I'm working it into my sponge. Okay, now we want to antique the whole edge of this. So I'm just going to take my sponge. I've got a little bit too much moisture in it, so I'm going to get some of the moisture out. And we're just going to kind of swirl it on the edges. And take the edge that doesn't have paint if you need to, and kind of clean up. We really want this to look old and worn. Grab a little bit more paint as you need it. Really age up these corners, these edges. I love this look. I might bring it in just a little bit. I just went and got a little bit more paint on my sponge. It takes such a small amount of paint to do this, so I don't want you to get tons of paint, because it will dry quickly and then you can go back and repeat. And I really like the super messy look, so especially when I'm trying to make things older. And I think that will probably be enough of that color for me. I think it looks great. Alright, I think I'm going to leave the letters just like they are. After I did all of the aging on the background, I really like it. I think it turned out super cute. So I'm going to make sure I get my dry brush cleaned out. And I think this project is going to be a very done project. I really enjoyed creating this. This was a lot of fun. Zoom in just a little bit. What a cute, cute project. So I am so glad that you guys stopped by to paint with me. I hope that you enjoyed painting this. I hope it was an easy, non-stress. Painting should always be not stressful. So breathe and relax and just enjoy the process, you guys. I enjoyed this. Thank you so much for painting with me, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.